Hello and namaskar. Today we will be continuing our discussion on the remedy Cocculus. We've already studied about it earlier, and that is the part one has been already done, and this is going to be part two of the remedy. In part one, we've seen the active principle of the remedy and its action in crude form, which we had seen was on the nervous system, the CNS, and how it produces paralysis. And Dr. Ken's beautiful explanation on the paralysis of this remedy was also studied. We've actually done the study of Cocculus from three different Materia Medicas, which is Dr. N.M. Choudhuri's Materia Medica, Dr. Ken's, and also Dr. Clarke's Materia Medica. And we've combined the literature from these three Materia Medicas and made notes, and we've studied from those notes in the part one. And we're also going to continue the same in part two, that is now in this video. And we also saw the ailments from for this remedy. We also studied about some different characteristics of this remedy, and we talked about the famous motion sickness of this remedy. Today we are going to learn this remedy even more and study its mental aspect and what happens in its GIT related symptoms, what happens in its female related symptoms. As you might know, Cocculus is also a great remedy for females, okay, for uterine related complaints, okay, for the female genitalia. And we'll also study its headache, because that is also very important. There is a very characteristic symptom in the headache of Cocculus actually. So we will see all of that today. And as you can see, we are going to start with the mind of this remedy. So Dr. N.M. Choudhuri and also Dr. Kent very beautifully tell us how this combination of all these feelings finally lead to ailments in this remedy Cocculus. Okay, so anxiety, as we've already seen in part one in the ailments from section, anxiety, okay, along with that there is loss of sleep, right? And why is all of this, why is the patient anxious, why is the patient not getting enough sleep? Because the patient is nursing somebody very close to him, a family member or relative, okay. They are nursing them and they are constantly worried about them, so they're anxious, they're worried about them, and that worry and anxiety is so much that they cannot even sleep at night, okay. And all of that, okay, will finally lead to ailments. And right now, as we are speaking about the mind, we'll see what happens to the mental aspect due to all of these all of these causes. Okay, so the mind appears to be approaching imbecility. Okay, so they are kind of approach stupidity, or they kind of seem to be approaching stupidity. They kind of seem to be getting dull mentally. And there's also one more cause due to nervous frustration in typhoid. So typhoid is a very exhausting disease, okay. You get diarrhea and you have abdominal pains, etc. So it also leads to some prostration, and in this remedy, that is also one of the factors which will finally lead to this ailment, okay. The mind will appear to be approaching imbecility. So all of these things, especially if you remember this situation as we've already discussed in part one, you're going to remember the ailments that happen in Cocculus. Okay, so this is what happens. And so now let's see how our authors very beautifully explain what is it that you see in the patient and feel that yeah, he is approaching imbecility. So Dr. Kent writes that the mind seems blank, the mental activities are slowed down. So you again see this thing, slowness. We have already seen this in part one, and our this little snail was indicating the slowness in part one also. But we were discussing about this slowness in relation to the nervous system, in relation to the paralysis that has been seen in this remedy. So you see, the slowness is not just seen in physical, as we've discussed in part one, but also in the mental sphere. That is the beauty of studying remedies, because you do find some similarity between even the various organs that the remedy affects. So you see, there is this slowness in the remedy. The mind seems blank, the mental activities are slowed down. He looks into the space and, slowly turning the eyes towards the questioner, answers with difficulty. Okay, this is also there in phosphoric acid. Mind answers reflects long is also a rubric that Dr. Ken gives. So what happens is, just as we've seen that the physical is aspect is also completely slowed down, there's paralytic weakness in them. In the same way, you see that even in the mind they are very much slowed down. Okay, they look into the space and just they cannot answer whatever somebody asks them. They have to think a lot and try to recollect their thoughts to be able to answer. It takes a long time for them do that. So there is confusion of mind and difficulty of articulation. So there's confusion in the mind and they cannot just recollect and then speak, okay, what they have recollected. That whole process is abnormal, okay, in them. It's not taking place in a normal way. So an idea comes to the mind. So let's see how. Okay, so an idea comes to mind. Dr. Kent has very, very beautifully actually explained this. So an idea comes to the mind and becomes fixed. In these people, whatever idea has come to their mind will become fixed. He cannot convert it or move it, but it just stays there. Okay, so just as we are speaking, okay, any two people are conversing and one puts forward some idea. That usually happens when we are conversing. Okay, we put forward some idea, we talk about something, and what happens it is, in this people, they will hold on to the same idea in the whole conversation. Even if you are changing the topic, changing the idea, then also this Cocculus patient will hold on to the previous idea which we were talking about, and he will not seem to move from it. Okay, but he stays there, and if he speaks, he will say something that will cause you to realize that the same idea is holding on to him. So now just you have changed the topic and you're talking to him about different topic right now, but again he will bring up the previous topic, okay, when he says something. So now you will understand, oh my god, he's just now even now he is stuck into the previous topic that we were talking about. In that way, now this slowness of comprehension is there. Okay, he cannot find the right word to express his thoughts. So slowly does his mind work. What has passed he cannot remember. He forgets what he has just read. He cannot talk. So you see, there is whole this slowness is very, very much seen in this remedy. The slowness of comprehension as well. They cannot comprehend what you're talking, and even if they comprehend, now they cannot find the right word to express what they are feeling, whatever thoughts they have. They cannot just find the right word to express it, and therefore there's also the document has also said that there is difficulty of articulation. Okay, so slowly does his mind work that what has passed, he cannot even remember. What has already happened, he cannot remember. He forgets what he has just read. He cannot talk. Okay, so there are a few rubrics that Dr. Kent also gives, which is mind dullness, sluggishness, difficulty of thinking and comprehending. So now if you take a case, if you meet somebody, not even take a case, meet somebody and you find them to be like this, you find that you get this experience while you are conversing with them, then what rubrics you should take? Okay, so at that point of time, when you're not able to think of rubrics, you should actually remember what you have learned right now. So what you're learning is, you have to go to mind section and you have to see the rubric dullness, sluggishness. Okay, there's nothing like mind, there's no rubric like mind slowness of comprehension, or there is not going to be a rubric like mind difficulty of articulation. Okay, the same words are not going to be there, but what words are there is mind dullness, sluggishness, difficulty of thinking and comprehending. You see, mind memory, weakness of thought for what has just. So you see here, what he has written is, what Dr. Kent writes is, he cannot find right word to express his thoughts. Okay, he cannot remember what has just passed. Okay, he forgets what he has just read. So how to convert it into rubric? So it is mind memory, weakness of thought for what has just. Mind memory, weakness of words for. Okay, so in this way you can take the rubrics while you are repertorizing for such a kind of situation. Moving ahead in the mind, we also see that time passes quickly for them. So he cannot realize that it has been a whole night. A week has gone by and it seems but a moment. He is so dazed, is what Dr. Kent says. So for them, time is passing very, very quickly. Right, that's what Dr. Kent is telling us. Now, patient sits as if wrapped in deep, sad thoughts and does not take notice of anything, Dr. Clarke mentions. So he's absorbed. So now, if you see somebody like this, then what rubric will you take for such kind of a situation? So your patient is just sitting and thinking something for a long time. And if you see him, he looks like he is wrapped up in some deep sad thoughts. And you talk to him, or something is happening around the place where he is sitting, but he will not take notice of anything that's happening around. He will not take notice of whatever you are talking about, just sitting besides him. So that tells you that he is not, he's not in he's just physically there but not mentally there. And if that situation is there in front of you, what rubric will you take? So there's this rubric: mind absorbed, buried in thought. So remember, absorbed. So mind absorbed, buried in thought is the rubric that you must take. And a Cocculus is a remedy in this rubric, okay? Mind introspection. So thinking, okay, thinking about something. Mind introspection. He's thinking about something. He's doing that in his own mind. He's introspecting. So these are some rubrics that you can take. Now, Cocculus, and these are also taken from Dr. Kent's repertory only, and this is written in Dr. Clarke's Materia Medica, but the rubric is in Dr. Kent's repertory. So, Cocculus now, like Ignatia, Staphysagra, Hyoscyamus, and Platinum, is a great remedy for the ill effects of anger and grief. So, you all know Staphysagra is so famous for anger as an ailment from, and Ignatia is very famous for grief as an ailment from. Okay, and now Dr. N.M. Choudhuri tells us that Cocculus, like Ignatia, Staphysagra, Hyoscyamus, and Platinum, a great remedy for ailments from or ill effects of anger and grief. You see, there is a rubric: mind, anger, ailments after anger with silent grief. So both are there, anger and silent grief. Now, actually, there's a very beautiful case by Dr. Adolphus Lippe. Okay, he has cured a case of enlargement of liver. Now, this shows you the action of this remedy on liver. Okay, so there's this enlargement of liver that was there. And the indication that he saw was that there's pain in the liver, which is aggravated after a fit of anger on the part of the patient. So, this anger in the patient, when there is an episode of anger, that gives rise to pain in the liver, and the liver is enlarged. So that kind of situation gives you, or should remind you, of Cocculus, because there's this case that Lippe has cured in this way. And this is actually very much written by many authors. Dr. Clarke writes about it, Dr. N.M. Choudhuri writes about it. So it's a very famous symptom of Cocculus, that anger will give rise to liver complaints or pain in liver, which gets aggravate your liver complaints. Okay, so this is also very important. We should remember this. We should not just remember this remedy for the anxiety, for the loss of sleep, for the nursing, which is very, very important, and we should not even forget this. But also remember anger along with that, because it is very important. Many authors have talked about it. So anger giving rise to complaints of liver. Then he is very easily affronted. Every trifle makes him angry. So the anger is a great aspect of this remedy. Every trifle is making him angry. That is what Dr. N.M. Choudhuri says. So every trifle making him angry is something you will think of Nux vomica for this this kind of symptom, which is very commonly known for anger, right? So we can also think of Cocculus. Cocculus is also a remedy which has every trifle makes him angry. Okay, disposition to take everything in bad part and to be angry. So he takes everything in bad part and he gets angry with that. Irritable weakness is there. It is a leading note in the Cocculus effects. The Cocculus patient is very sensitive to fear, to anger, to grief, and all mental disturbances, also to noise and to touch. And this we've seen in part 1. Okay, so they are very, very sensitive to everything, to fear, to anger, to grief, and all the mental disturbances. That is what we see. So what did we discuss in mind? This is all. What did we discuss in mind? We saw that all the ailments from that we've talked about until now also affect the mind. And what do they do affecting the mind? They will cause dullness of mind. The mind will seem as if it is approaching imbecility. The patient is becoming mad or stupid. And how do you know that? The mind of the patient will will be very blank, will be very, very slow. There will be dullness, sluggishness. They will not be able to answer quickly. They will have to take a lot of time to think, recollect their thoughts. And it's not that they might not even be able to comprehend what you're saying in the first place, and there will be difficulty in articulation, to recollect thoughts and to express them in words is something that is they find difficult. and there's this confusion of mind, and if they have an idea in the mind, it will get fixed and they cannot move on to another topic that you're talking about, and they cannot just find the right word to talk, and time passes very quickly for them, as we've seen here. Okay, time passes very quickly for them. They cannot realize how long the time has been. Okay, the patient will sit as if wrapped in deep sad thoughts, and the rubric for that is mind absorbed buried in thought. Okay, and then you see that Cocculus has ill effects of anger and grief also, especially the liver getting affected because of the anger. Okay, the indication, as you this indication, you have to remember there's this case, let me pick your for that same situation. Okay, they are, every rifle will make them angry, and they will take everything in bad part and be angry about everything. Irritable weakness is also there. Okay, he's very sensitive to everything. All right. That's what we learnt about Cocculus in the mind. Isn't Cocculus's mind very interesting and connected to the physicals, as we've seen the slowness in the first part? Right. Let's move on to talk about the GIT, because we've seen the nausea of this remedy when we talked about the motion sickness of this remedy. So we already know that somewhere this remedy has an action on GIT. But now let's dig in deep and see what action it has on GIT, except or other than just the feeling of nausea. Okay. So Dr. N.M. Choudhuri says that Cocculus has been highly recommended for chronic dyspepsia. So acidity, which is chronic dyspepsia. And what are the causes? So stimulants, so having a lot of stimulants, or long study. So a lot of mental exertion that you're doing. You've been studying for a long time. Okay, for days, for weeks, for months. And you've been taking a lot of stimulants that will give rise to chronic dyspepsia in this patient. What will be the symptoms in this dyspepsia and this acidity? So they will have this confused feeling in head after eating or drinking. So after having food is they start feeling confused in the head. So you see head related symptoms after food. Nausea, vertigo. And do you remember the nausea? When we were talking about the motion sickness, we also had discussed about nausea of this remedy in great detail. So the nausea of this remedy is actually when they even just think of food. So even thought of food, okay, just thinking. So just now, if I speak of any kind of dish, so if maybe I just tell you about pani puri or about cakes or about any kind of food, just that will make them nauseate. Okay, so just the thought of food, just listening to some food and just thinking about it, even not even listening to the name of that recipe or that dish, but just thinking about it is not going to give them nausea. And the other remedies were colchicum, which Dr. Kent had also told us, because colchicum is very famous for that. Just the thought of food will give them nausea in colchicum also. But Dr. Emil Tyler has also added arsenic and sepia as differentials when there is just this thought of smell giving nausea. Yeah, we've discussed that in part 1. So that kind of nausea is there, vertigo is there, salivation is there, and absolute loss of appetite. And over here, Dr. N.M. Choudhuri, about related to this, also tells us that it is not the want of appetite actually in these patients. Okay, what is meant by want of appetite? So there are various symptoms in Materia Medica where it is written want of. Want of means that it is lacking. So if the patient is not feeling hungry, they have no appetite, that is loss of appetite is there, that means that they need appetite, they need to be hungry. So that is want of appetite. Okay, anytime that is written, it means that thing is needed. Okay, the patient should have that. So want of appetite is there in this patient because they have no appetite. And that want of appetite, that trouble of Cocculus, is not just that there's loss, but this loss is why. Okay, why is there this patient, why is this patient not feeling hungry or not wanting to eat? That is because there is an eternal aversion to food. And why is there an eternal aversion to food? That is because even the smell or thought of food is going to give them nausea. So they don't want to eat because that will give them nausea, and that is why they just go into this complete want of appetite. They do not want to eat at all. That is the cause. That is what Dr. N.M. Choudhuri tells us. Okay, there's metallic taste in mouth, burning in esophagus, extending to fauces with the taste of sulfur in mouth. These all symptoms are given by Dr. N.M. Choudhuri. So these are the kind of symptoms that are there in the remedy for the dyspepsia. Now let's see a few more symptoms that are mentioned. So in the stomach, there is this sensation as though worms were crawling in the stomach. There are violent cramps, spasms of the stomach, and the pain is a gripping, pinching, constrictive pain, and emptiness and hollowness sensation. As we have already seen in part one, this is a kind of a general feature of this remedy, characteristic feature of this remedy. You see this emptiness, hollowness sensation in all parts of the body. So in just that way also only, it is also there in the stomach related symptoms. Okay. In abdomen, we see that this is a very unique or different kind of symptom, that the pain in the bowels feels as if the intestines were pinched between sharp stones. So can you imagine the intestines being pinched between two stones or sharp stones? Okay, so that kind of sensation is there in cocculus, and this sensation is especially during diarrhea. So during diarrhea, what will they feel? What is the characteristic sensation of cocculus? They will feel as if their intestines were pinched between sharp stones. And now, what is the causative factor of this diarrhea? What is giving rise to this diarrhea? So this diarrhea may be brought on by riding a short distance in car. So can you imagine just riding a short distance in car, and that just gives them diarrhea, and that also not a simple diarrhea. In diarrhea, they have this kind of feeling that, not every time they will have this kind of feeling, but they may have. That is a classical picture that is shown, that the bowels are being pinched between sharp stones, and it also occurs only during day. So this is a modality. So this diarrhea of cocculus happens only during day. At night, they can sleep peacefully, there's no diarrhea, but in the day they'll have diarrhea. So if you have this kind of symptoms, you can think of cocculus. So rectum diarrhea, riding from. Okay, so now you should know that when you are studying when you're taking, repertorizing through the Kent's repertory, what you also need to remember is for diarrhea, if your patient has diarrhea and you want to repertorize that, you need not go into the stool chapter, but you have to go into the rectum chapter. Okay, so that also we need to remember. So which chapter has what kind of rubric? So rectum diarrhea, riding from. And abdomen pain, stones like sharp rubbing together. So even this sensation has a rubric for it, which you can take. Okay, so first you have to go into the location, which is abdomen, and then what is happening? So the pain is happening. So pain, and what kind of pain? Stones like sharp rubbing together. So tearing, cutting, spasmodic pains are seen in this remedy. There's great distension of abdomen and flatulent colic. Dr. Clarke actually talks a lot about this flatulent colic, and he also tells us that there is this spasmodic flatulent colic in this patients about, at midnight actually, and the flatus is passed, but there is no relief. So flatulent colic means you have this pain in abdomen because there is a lot of accumulation of flatus, but even passing flatus is not relieving them, and especially this pain is at midnight. In such cases, recurring several, and this happened several nights with in that patient, for that patient, and it was actually promptly cured by cocculus 3x, is what Dr. Clarke tells us. Okay, so there's a case about this flatulent colic that he mentions, as I've just now told you. So what happened in that case? There was this flatulent colic which happened at midnight, and it happened for several nights. What happened in the flatulent colic was, even if it was due to flatulence, the flatulence was not relieving it. Okay, even passing flatus was not relieving it. Doctor gave him cocculus, and it helped. So that was about the GIT related symptoms of this remedy. We have seen chronic dyspepsia and the causes for that. We've seen the symptoms that happen in it, and we've seen the other stomach and abdomen related symptoms as well. And in that, what you need to remember very nicely is the chronic dyspepsia happens due to these reasons. And in this, you have to remember especially the loss of appetite, and we have seen the reason for that. Nausea, vertigo, you have to remember. And you have to remember how there are few symptoms in head after eating, that is something related to GIT giving a rise in something related to head. Okay, metallic taste vagara is okay. And in stomach, you have to remember this crawling kind of sensation is also there in this remedy. Cramps and all is okay. Emptiness or hollowness, you can write obviously, or you can think of it obviously, because this is a characteristic sensation of this remedy. So any part you talk about, this is going to be there. In abdomen, you have to remember that this kind of a sensation is there, and especially during diarrhea. Why is there diarrhea? It can be due to riding in car, and it occurs only during day, is something you should not forget. That is what you have to remember about the GIT of this remedy. Now let's move ahead and talk about the female related symptoms of this remedy. So here you see that the menses appear too soon, so they can come just 2 weeks before time also. They will last too long, so they're coming too soon. They're also lasting too long, and the flow is very, very much. So it is copious. It's a lot. And what are the ailments from? Again the same ailments from repeat, and that is why we studied it in general points only. So the ailments from are again the same, that is the woman is prostrated from the grief, from the anxiety, from the prolonged loss of sleep. So all of these situations are there. Anxiety, loss of sleep, and all of that nursing kind of situation is again there. And what will it lead to in the female, especially female related symptoms? It might give you copious early menses, as we have just now talked about. Okay, so too soon menses which lasts too long and flow is copious, so that can happen. So copious early menses will be there. Otherwise there will be no menses, so suppression of menses, which is also called clinically as amenorrhea. Okay, so amenorrhea can happen, no menses. Okay, suppression of menses can happen, or copious leukorrhea in place of menses can also happen. Okay, so copious early menses, so menses are there but they will come earlier and there will be a lot of profuse flow, or they might not come at all, or they might not come but in their place there will be leukorrhea, and that too profuse, a lot of leukorrhea, copious leukorrhea. Now there is also one rubric that Dr. Ken mentions: genitalia female, menses copious, standing aggravate. So standing will aggravate, so there will be a lot of aggravation while they're standing. Maybe the flow will increase, maybe they will have pain, so that will happen. Many symptoms are aggravated at menses is what Dr. Clarke tells us, and many symptoms are really aggravated during menses. At menses, that's what we will see now. So there's this whole list that happens during menses. So this is something which is very, very important. So what happens? Let's see. So during menses, they can have piles, and this is something which Dr. Clarke actually talks about. Okay, there's this piles during menses in these patients. Headache can also be there, and this remedy has a very characteristic headache. We're going to talk about it. Vertigo and nausea, these are there accompanying everywhere almost. So in motion sickness they are there, they are very characteristic for this remedy: nausea, vertigo. Violent cramping pain in bowels, again we've seen this kind of stone pinching kind of pain in these patients. Clutching pain in uterus. Okay, menses associated with violent abdominal spasms, contracting painful moanings and howlings from the patient. So you see, the pain is so violent, so much that this patient is moaning and howling. Can you imagine? She is moaning and she is howling. That amount of pain, excruciating pain, Cocculus can have during menses. So they have a lot of aggravation during menses. So let's see a few rubrics. Genitalia female, pain, cramping, uterus, motion from. So again you see this motion. So this motion sickness is not leaving any part of the body. It is affecting every part. So even from motion they're having this kind of cramping pain in the uterus. Abdomen distension, menses during. So we've already seen many complaints that happen in this patient during menses. Now we also see that the abdomen is also getting distended. So actually you see piles, nausea, violent cramping pain in bowels, and also abdominal distension are all related to GIT. So many symptoms related to GIT get aggravated during menses. That what you can just roughly remember. So in Cocculus you have to remember many GIT related symptoms get aggravated during menses. Now there's a case that Dr. Clarke gives us. I will just talk about that case. So Cocculus actually has cured a case of delirium at onset of menses during the first and the second day. So just now we saw many things that happen during menses, but it also affects the mind during menses. And what did the patient say? So this is very interesting. The patient says that I always see something alive on wall, floor, chairs. So she sees some organism which is alive and is kind of maybe walking or rolling or crawling on the a wall, floor, chairs, or anywhere, always rolling, and she feels that now that organism will also roll on me. So you see, this is unique, different, weird kind of delirium that this patient, visual that this patient is having. And so you now can see not just the GIT, not just the physical, but even the mind aspect, mental aspect is getting affected during menses. And that case was cured with Cocculus by Dr. Clarke. So this is very important. So that was all about female. What did we see? We first saw that these ailments from will give rise to either this copious kind of menses, or will give rise to suppression of menses, that amenorrhea will be there, or in the place of menses there will be copious leukorrhea. So all that can happen, and many symptoms are aggravated at menses is what we saw. And there's this kind of difficult kind of, there is this very excruciating dysmenorrhea that these patients have. What is the meaning of dysmenorrhea? Means pain during menses. So there's this kind of abdominal spasms which are very violent, and the patient will moan and howl. That's what we saw. Now let's move on to the head related symptoms, which is the last kind of area that we're going to discuss about, because that is what Dr. N.M. Choudhuri, Dr. Kent, or Dr. Clarke, Dr. Clarke actually talks about a lot of things, but Dr. N.M. Choudhuri and Kent has just, focused on this, and that is why we're also going to talk about that. So that is head. And finally, then at the end, we'll just talk about a few more important points and we'll conclude. So what happens in the head? So Cocculus, again, like gelsemium, it has a headache especially located in the occiput and in the nape of neck. So even gelsemium has this occipital headache, which is very famously known that gelsemium has this occipital headache. Now even Cocculus has that kind of headache. So Cocculus also has this headache which is especially located in the occiput and in the nape of neck. And it is mostly of nervous or gastric origin. So GIT coming in again. So it can be nervous or gastric in origin. What happens is it is brought on by working. So again, it is brought on by mental exertion, by working, or by riding in a carriage, or even in a boat, or any even in car, anything. Okay, so motion sickness again coming up. So this is brought on by working or by riding in a carriage, boat, train, etc. Whatever, that will give them headache. And what is the strongest part of the headache? What is the peculiar sensation of this headache? The peculiar sensation of this headache is that they feel as if there is this opening and shutting of the scalp happening, and that it happens in the region of the back portion of the head, which is the occiput. So they feel as if there's something just opening and shutting. So their head is kind of opening and shutting, this kind of sensation, which is very weird actually. We never think that somebody might be having this kind of sensation, but yes, people do have. Cocculus has this kind of sensation. Now you have to remember from now on, we all have to remember from now on that there's this kind of opening and shutting sensation of scalp in the occipital region in the remedy Cocculus. Okay, so they have headache, which is especially in this region, and this kind of sensation is also in this region only, occiput. It is brought on by working, riding. What else? So we see that there is this kind of a dull and undulating sensation in the brain. The patient is unable to lie on the back of the head. So on the whole situation happens in the occiput. The whole pain or the headache is the opening and shutting sensation is happening in the occipital region, and that is why he is not able to lie on the back of the head, that is on the occipital region, and he has to turn to the sides. Head feels as if it is tightly bound, okay, as if it is tightly bound by a cord, or as if nerves in the head are just drawn up tightly. The brain feels as if it was compressed into a small bulk. So it is just, it feels as if it has been tightly bound. It has been, just tightly drawn up, and that is why the brain is feeling as if it is compressed into a small bulk. And that is the whole sensation that these patients tend to have. That's all about head. Now, a few more peculiar sensations that these or symptoms that these have, which are mentioned by Dr. Emil Tyler. So Dr. Emil Tyler actually gives a whole list of characteristic symptoms which you should go back and read. But right now, let's just discuss a few very interesting symptoms. So there's pain in tendo Achilles. Okay, there's pain in tendo Achilles, and this is the Achilles tendon over here. You see this one. So this is a tendon, Achilles tendon, and that actually is painful in our remedy Cocculus. So what happens? Let's see. So only when walking this pain is there in this tendo Achilles. There's no tenderness as such, meaning if you touch it, there's no pain. Only during walking it comes on. But when the patient is walking, then due to the pain he is limped. Okay, he's not able to walk nicely. He's obliged to turn the foot outwards to stop and hold foot up to relieve the pain. Ascending steps was especially painful. So you see this whole kind of situation happening. So if your patient has this pain in tendo Achilles and these kind of symptoms, you can think of this remedy now. And sleep aggravates all the symptoms of the remedy, especially of the head. And Dr. Emil Tyler, gives a very beautiful comparison of this remedy in regard to the places where nausea is felt. So if you see nausea being felt in head and mouth, then the remedy is Cocculus. Okay, and if you see it in rectum, so can you imagine nausea being felt in rectum? then the remedy is ruta. So R for rectum, R for ruta. And if the nausea is felt in ears, then the remedy is Dioscorea. Okay, so you can remember this kind of symptoms, these interesting weird symptoms actually. So in head and mouth, Cocculus; in rectum, ruta; in ears, Dioscorea. So this is all about the remedy. Now let's just quickly revise what we've talked about. So we started first by talking about the mind of the remedy, and what did we find out in mind? We saw that there's this whole situation of ailments from which we have already discussed in part 1, giving rise to kind of imbecility in these patients. And what is this imbecility? How did we find this imbecility? Because the patient became blank in the whole the mental sphere. The whole thing was just slowed down. So his whole mind was just slowed down. So how did you find this slowness? So the patient used to look in the space and he was just think. There was this confusion of mind in this remedy. There was this problem in comprehension in this remedy. And what happens if an idea comes? It just remains fixed, right? And he cannot just go on to another topic, move on to another topic. He just keeps on thinking about the same kind of symptom, or sorry, same kind of topic or idea, and he cannot find the right word. So there's problem in articulation also. He cannot talk about the right word, and this whole thing that we saw. Then we also saw that how time passes very quickly in these patients. Okay, very quickly time passes. Even if a whole night is gone, they will not understand. They feel that it was just a moment that has been gone, and they are absorbed. Okay, they will sit and they will just keep thinking about something very deep and sad, and he'll not be able to take notice of anything around them. And then we also saw that there was a problem that they had from anger, which was actually affecting their liver. And we talked about a case that we studied a case that Dr. Lippe had actually cured, which was about this whole situation. Then we've seen that they get angry very, very quickly. Why? Any kind of trifle can make them angry. Okay, irritable weakness is there in this remedy. Then we moved on to talk about the GIT of this remedy. And in GIT, what did we see? In GIT, we saw that there is this chronic dyspepsia, which especially came from stimulants, and it also came from long studies. And what was there? What was happening in the dyspepsia? Again, the same kind of symptoms. The nausea was there, the vertigo was there, confused feeling in head after eating, an absolute want of appetite, which you should remember. Want of appetite is there. And what you should remember is why is it there? So because of nausea on even thought of food. And what were the other differential remedies? That also you should remember. So thought of food, or we all should remember. So that was colchicum, arsenic, and sepia being added by Emil Tyler. And then we've seen that there's in the stomach there's a sensation as if there were worms crawling in the stomach, and emptiness or hollowness sensation, which is characteristic of this remedy also. In the abdomen, what would we see? So in the abdomen, there's this actually very important symptom that in they feel that is as if their bowels were pinched in between stones, right? And we saw that this happens especially during diarrhea. Why does the diarrhea happen? It can happen due to motion, yeah, and it especially is during day only. There's no diarrhea during night. And we saw this flatulent colic, which also talked about Dr. Clarke's case relating to this flatulent colic that this remedy has. Then we talked about the female related symptoms of this remedy. It is a great female remedy, and the ailments from again will can give rise to 3 situations. First, copious menses can be there. Second, no menses, means suppression of menses, that is amenorrhea clinically. And there can be again no menses, but in the place of menses you see a lot of leukorrhea, that can be there. And then we saw that during menses they have a lot of symptoms, especially related to GIT. Hair, delirium. We also saw a case in which there was delirium during menses. There can be many symptoms during menses. Then we saw the head related symptoms of this remedy. Okay, what happened to the head? It was like gelsemium relating to the occipital region, okay, in the or to the occiput, and it came from maybe nervous origin, maybe gastric in origin. It was due to riding, yeah, it was due to working. And what happened was a sensation as if there was something opening and shutting, right, in the back of the head. And since it was in the back of the head, they cannot lie on the back, okay, or lie on occiput. You have to lie on sides, and there's this kind of feeling as if it is tightly bound, or as if it is tightly bound in a cord, and as if the brain has been shrunk, okay, due to our brain is just compressed into a small bulk. And then at the end we also saw that there's this tendo-achilles kind of pain that is there in this remedy there, that also limps them while walking. Sleep aggravates the symptoms, and we saw that the nausea is felt in different regions for different remedies, and we discussed about it. R for rectum, R for ruta, right, rectum, ruta. We saw that mouth and head was for Cocculus, and finally we saw ears for Dioscorea, right? So that is what we talked about in today's discussion about this remedy. So I hope you all gained some value from this, and we should all go back